Now, I usually don't follow news about technology or gadgets that I can't get in my own country, but once in a while a gadget like a smartphone comes out that you have to take notice. And I think with a phone with an absurd hardware like this, I think we are trying to answer a question that is this phone actually useful or is it just a gimmick? Now, I think it's a gimmick and I'll explain why. In case you don't know what I'm talking about in this Japanese website, I'm talking about the newest phone from Sharp. It's their Aquos R6. I mean, you may know Sharp as the cutting-edge display manufacturer from Japan, and you are right, they make some amazing 8K displays, but they also have a smartphone lineup which was pretty active a couple of years ago. Like if you remember the Sharp Aquos Crystal, I believe it was called, the first 3-side bezel-less phone where all of the phone hardware was in the bottom, like the front-facing camera, the notification LED was on the bottom, and on the top 3 sides there was pretty much nothing, it was all screen. But eventually China phones took over, like Xiaomi and the BBK Electronics family, so they kind of fell off. And again, that's primarily their fault because they never really focused outside of Japan, just like some other company who failed because of lack of marketing. But the Aquos R6 has a pretty amazing feature which is not there in any other phone right now, which is a 1-inch camera sensor. Like it's literally 1/1 inch. It's the biggest sensor available on any smartphone at this point. The second closest was the Xiaomi Mi 11 Ultra with a 1/1.1 inch. I mean, it's pretty much the same. But yeah, this thing is for all of those who think that size matters. I mean, if you wanted any indication that this phone is not at all geared for any market outside of Japan, you can look at their own website. It's all in Japanese, even though I came from their own site which initially loaded in English. That's the selling point of this phone, and it's not a new phone by any means, and it is co-engineered with Leica, and here's why the original question, I think this is a gimmick. You see, having a larger sensor in your phone has some advantages. You get a much more natural shallow depth of field, you get brighter night shots without having to use a longer shutter speed like night mode as you call it. I mean, here's the biggest problem. Here's why I think it's a gimmick. You see, any company or any manufacturer who makes a radical new improvement on their phone like this will really care about how it impacts the end users. In the sense, they'll really care about how this hardware integrates with their software. I mean, Google literally spends all of their time talking about their software, right? They barely spend any time talking about their hardware because it's the same 12 megapixel sensor which will now change with the new upcoming Pixel 6. But I mean, they do all of their things with software and they are pretty proud of it, and for very good reason. Google's software is amazing. And when you're dealing with tightly integrated devices like smartphones, software is most of the story. Even if you have a crappy hardware, you can get away with stellar quality software, and that is where the Sharp Aquos R6 falls apart. And you can clearly see from the camera samples that in terms of dynamic range, this thing falls short of most other market options like the Galaxy S21 Ultra or even the iPhones, which have the smallest sensors. Yes, having a larger sensor is definitely beneficial, but if you don't have a proper software to back it up, then it just becomes a spec in your hardware sheet. And another reason why I think it's a gimmick is because of the brand partnership with Leica. You know, Leica was traditionally always associated with Huawei. You know, Huawei and Leica had a pretty good partnership going on with their cameras ever since the days of, I think, the Huawei P9 or maybe even earlier than that. And that partnership recently ended, and Leica quickly switched over to another partner, which is Aquos. And the same phone has been rebranded under Leica as a separate device. It's literally the same smartphone with the same camera sensor, but 2 different brand names. I think that was part of the agreement. You know, Leica will help them make this radical new sensor, so that will give Sharp and the Aquos series some attention in the media, and in exchange Sharp will allow Leica to have their own version of a phone, so consumers can buy whichever they like. Now, I personally like the Leica's phone design a little bit more. I mean, it's the same phone, but they're calling it the Leitz phone. And even though it has pretty impressive set of hardware like 240Hz refresh rate on the display and everything, it just reminds me of the Lenovo's Z5, the whole shenanigans that they were up to on Twitter, if you remember. I mean, yeah, they got a lot of backlash because of that, but Lenovo was not in a place to get a lot of positive feedback anyway. They had no press, and Sharp followed a similar method here, that any attention is good attention. So yeah, I mean, even though they're not gonna have record-breaking sales, at least they got their idea back out in the market again. At least they had people talk about Sharp once again in the smartphone world. I mean, it's not like they're going anywhere with their high-end 8K TVs, and now they have something to show off in their smartphone department as well. Looks like everyone is profiteering off of Huawei's losses these days. But Huawei has their own thing going on. Like their sister brand called Honor, they released their Honor Magic 3, which is again a pretty incredible phone. Let me know if you want to see a video on that. But that in a nutshell were kind of my thoughts on the Sharp Aquos R6, the 1-inch camera sensor phone.